Rain fell softly over Portland as Emily stood at the kitchen counter, trying to make dinner while thinking about how hard the past year had been. She had married Daniel with hope in her heart, believing their blended family would eventually feel warm and natural. But nothing felt normal lately. The house felt tense, the days felt heavy, and most of that weight came from Ethan Daniel's quiet, withdrawn 17-year-old son. Emily had tried to reach him many times, always gently, always with patience. But his emotional walls were high, cold, and closed. He stayed in his room, skipped meals, and avoided any kind of conversation like it would hurt him to speak. She could sense he was hurting, but she didn't know how to get close without scaring him away. That evening, the sound of his footsteps suddenly broke the silence. Emily turned, surprised to see him standing in the doorway. His hoodie was damp from the rain, his eyes red from lack of sleep, and his breathing tight, as if he had run out of strength before reaching the kitchen. Ethan never came to her unless he needed something small, never with emotion, never with vulnerability. But today, something was different. The look on his face wasn't distant or irritated. It was scared, lost, like someone who couldn't carry one more thing on his back. Emily took one step toward him, not speaking, afraid any wrong word would make him pull away the way he always did. But Ethan didn't move. He lifted his eyes to hers, and in a shaky voice that didn't sound like him at all, he whispered, "I can't take it anymore." The words hit her harder than she expected. They came from a place of exhaustion, a place where a young person stops pretending to be okay. Emily froze, and her heart trembled as she tried to understand what he meant. Was he struggling with school, missing his mother, feeling lost in their new family? Or was this something deeper, something that had been building quietly inside him for months while she and Daniel tried to guess what he needed? She stepped closer, but he shook his head quickly, almost panicking at the idea of talking. His voice cracked as he repeated, "I just can't." Then he stepped back, turned around, and walked away before she could say anything else. His shoulders were tight, his steps uneven, like he was trying to hold himself together long enough to reach his room. The sound of his door closing felt heavier than any thunder outside. Emily stood still in the kitchen, feeling the echo of his words in the silence he left behind. She had known Ethan was struggling, but this was the first time he had shown anything like this. She wanted to follow him, to make him sit down and talk, but she also knew forcing him could push him further away. And she couldn't risk that. Not when he had finally spoken the truth hiding beneath his silence. She sat at the table, her hands trembling, replaying the moment again and again in her mind. His voice wasn't angry, it wasn't rebellious. It was tired, deeply tired, the kind of tired that made her worry about what he was fighting inside his head. She had been a teacher for years before marrying Daniel. She had seen teenagers struggle. She had seen them break down, but nothing prepared her for the fear she felt now. Because this wasn't just a student. This was her stepson, the young boy she had come to care for, even if he never let her show it. A part of her wanted to run upstairs and check on him. Another part told her to wait, to breathe, to think. She didn't want him to feel cornered. Instead, she tried to calm herself, trying to understand what could have pushed him to say those words. Their home had been full of unspoken tension ever since his mother moved to another state and Daniel remarried. Ethan had lost his old routine, his old sense of identity, and maybe even a bit of trust along the way. Emily knew all of that, but hearing him say he couldn't take it anymore meant things were worse than she thought. Only one question stayed. In her mind, why did he choose to say those words to her hand, not to his father? That question stayed with her long after the rain stopped, long after the house went quiet again, and long after Ethan's bedroom light turned off. Something inside him was breaking, and she didn't know how long he could hold on before it fell apart completely. The next morning came with a cold, gray sky, but Emily barely noticed it. She kept thinking about Ethan's trembling voice and the fear behind his words. The moment she heard Daniel's footsteps in the hallway, she felt her heartbeat jump. She had to tell him she couldn't keep what happened to herself. Over breakfast, she explained everything quickly, from Ethan standing in the doorway to the moment he walked away. Daniel listened in silence, his face tightening with every detail. When she finished, he let out a long breath and stared at the table. "He's slipping away from me," he muttered. "I can see it, but I don't know how to fix it." Emily knew he meant well, but she also understood how much guilt he carried. After Ethan's mother moved, Daniel tried to be both parents at once. He worked longer hours. He stayed up worrying. But the more he tried, the more Ethan pulled back. Emily gently touched his hand. "He's hurting. He's not angry at you. He's overwhelmed." Daniel didn't argue, but he didn't look convinced either. He simply nodded and said he would try talking to Ethan later. Emily wanted to believe it would help, but she knew Ethan wasn't ready for direct confrontation. He needed space. He needed someone who would listen without judgment. And she wasn't sure Daniel's the father he admired, but feared disappointing was the right person for that conversation yet. The day passed slowly. Emily cleaned, cooked, tried to read, but nothing could push the worry from her thoughts. When the school bus dropped Ethan off in the afternoon, she glanced out the window. His shoulders were lower than usual, his backpack dragging behind him as if it weighed more than he could handle. He walked inside without a word, heading straight for the backyard instead of his room. Emily hesitated for a moment, then followed quietly. She found him sitting on the old wooden bench beneath the maple tree, staring at the wet grass. His hoodie was pulled over his head again, and he looked exhausted, like he had used every bit of energy just to hold himself together. Emily approached slowly so she wouldn't scare him off. She didn't sit too close. She didn't speak right away. As she finally did, her voice was soft. "I'm glad you're outside." Fresh air helps. Ethan didn't respond at first, but he didn't leave either. After a while, he whispered, "Everything feels too heavy." Emily leaned forward slightly. "You don't have to explain everything, but you can tell me whatever you want." He shook his head. "It's not you. I don't know how to deal with things anymore." The sadness in his voice tightened something inside her. She kept her tone gentle. "I'm here. I won't push you, but I'm listening." Slowly, Ethan's hands loosened, and he let out a breath he'd been holding for far too long. "I don't fit anywhere," he said quietly. "I don't fit here. I don't fit at school. Everything changed too fast. And it feels like everyone expects me to handle it like an adult." Emily felt a wave of sympathy. "You're allowed to struggle. You're allowed to feel lost. That doesn't make you weak." He looked at the ground, blinking back the emotion threatening to break again. "People think I'm fine. I don't talk because I don't even know where to start." "Start anywhere," Emily said softly. "Even small things." For a moment, Ethan seemed ready to open up more. But then the sound of a car engine rolled into the driveway. Daniel had come home early. Ethan stiffened, immediately, shoulders tight, breathing shallow, eyes dropping to the ground again. "I have homework," he mumbled, standing up quickly. The moment of openness closed just as fast. Emily watched him rush inside, feeling the opportunity slip away. Daniel walked over and asked, "Was he talking?" "Little," she said. "But he pulled back when he heard you." Daniel's face fell. He didn't say anything else, but his eyes showed how much it hurt. Emily knew things were reaching a point where silence was no longer safe. Ethan was carrying more than he could handle, and the distance between father and son was growing dangerously wide. Something needed to change soon. But she didn't know that the real breaking point was even closer than she imagined. Tension hung over the house like a storm about to break. Emily had barely slept, thinking about Ethan and how fragile he seemed. Every time she heard a creak in the floorboards or a door close, her mind raced, wondering if he was hiding more pain than she could imagine. That evening, Daniel and Emily found themselves in the living room. Voices low but strained, trying to discuss Ethan without him hearing. Daniel ran a hand over his face. "I feel like I'm failing him," he admitted. "I'm trying to be a good father, but he doesn't let me in." Emily shook her head gently. "You're doing your best. He's just hurting." He needs time and patience. The argument wasn't about blame. It was about fear that the boy they both loved was slipping away. After their quiet discussion, Emily went upstairs. She noticed Ethan's door slightly open. A dim light spilled into the hallway. At first she hesitated, unsure if she should enter. But something pulled her forward. There he was, sitting on the floor, knees drawn to his chest, hoodie pulled over his head. His shoulders shook slightly, and his fingers fidgeted with the sleeve of his sweatshirt. He looked small, fragile, and exhausted. Emily knelt carefully at the doorway, maintaining a respectful distance. "Ethan," she said softly, "I'm here. You don't have to do this alone." He looked up for a moment, eyes glossy with unshed tears, but quickly dropped his gaze. "I don't know how to talk to Dad," he admitted, voice trembling. "I don't want him to think I'm weak or spoiled." Emily's heart ached. She wanted to hug him, to tell him he was perfect just as he was, but she stayed still. "You're not weak," she said gently. "Everyone struggles. Everyone needs someone to listen. That doesn't make you less." He let out a shaky breath. "I feel invisible sometimes, like no one really sees me." His words hit Emily harder than she expected. She had known he was withdrawn, but hearing him express it so clearly made it real. "I see you," she whispered, "and I care about you. You don't have to carry everything inside yourself." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He just stared at the floor, letting the truth hang in the air. Emily spoke carefully, almost like she was holding a fragile object. "I know this family has changed a lot for you. You've lost routines, stability, the way things used to be. That's a lot for anyone to handle. It's okay to feel upset. It's okay to feel confused." Ethan's breathing slowed slightly, as if the words gave him permission to release some of the pressure he had held for so long. He whispered, I don't know how to be me anymore. I don't know what I'm supposed to do." Emily stayed with him quietly, offering no judgment, only presence. "You can start with small steps," she suggested. "Talk to me when you're ready. Talk to Dad when it feels right. You don't have to solve everything at once." He nodded slightly but didn't speak. The tears rolled down his cheeks, and Emily felt a mix of sorrow and hope. For the first time, he was showing his true emotions instead of hiding them behind walls of silence. From the staircase, Daniel watched silently, unseen. His chest tightened as he realized the depth of his son's struggle. The boy he had worried about for months had been carrying a burden alone, trying to protect his father from worry. Daniel's heart ached, and he felt a surge of guilt mixed with love. He wanted to step in to say something, but he stayed still. He understood that this was Emily's moment with Ethan, an opportunity to connect without pressure. After a long silence, Ethan finally spoke again, voice barely audible. "I'm scared I'll let everyone down." Emily reached out just enough to touch his hand lightly. "You won't. You're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to feel lost. But you're not alone. Not anymore." He glanced up at her, eyes wide, as if realizing she meant every word. He didn't speak further, but Emily could see the shift in him, the beginnings of trust. A crack in the armor he had built for so long. Eventually, Ethan wiped his tears and stood slowly. Still fragile, but a little lighter than before. I think I need some time," he said softly, retreating to his room. Emily watched him go, heart pounding, knowing she had reached him, even if only a little. She knew healing would take time, patience, and understanding. But for the first time in months, she felt hope. Something inside Ethan had begun to open, and maybe, just maybe, the storm over their family had started to clear. As Emily sat back, taking a quiet breath, she knew one thing clearly. The hardest moments were not over, but the walls had started to come down. And that was the first step toward real connection and healing. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the house. Emily sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, her thoughts still on Ethan. The last few days had been heavy. But she noticed small changes, a quieter tension, a more thoughtful look in his eyes, a small willingness to respond when spoken to. She knew healing was not instant, but hope was slowly creeping back into the household. Daniel walked in looking serious but determined. He had decided it was time to approach Ethan directly, to finally have a real conversation with his son without distractions or distractions. Emily watched him, feeling both nervous and hopeful, wondering if her presence would help or make Ethan retreat. Daniel called Ethan gently, asking him to take a walk in the nearby park. Emily stayed back, pretending to water the plants, but her eyes kept darting toward the front window. Minutes felt like hours as she waited. The front door opened and Ethan appeared, backpack slung over one shoulder, hesitant, cautious. Daniel offered a quiet smile and a reassuring nod. Ethan glanced at Emily, and for a brief moment she saw a flicker of trust. He didn't say anything, just followed his father outside. The walk was long but quiet at first. Daniel didn't rush him, didn't force conversation. He let Ethan lead the pace, letting him speak when he was ready. The trees along the path swayed gently in the breeze. The park nearly empty, offering them privacy. Slowly, Ethan began to talk. At first, it was small things: school, friends, homework, but gradually, the deeper emotions surfaced. He spoke of the loneliness he had felt since his mother moved away, the pressure he felt to live up to expectations, and the guilt he carried for struggling with his own feelings. Daniel listened, really listened, without judgment, without interruption, giving his son the space he had craved for months. Ethan's voice faltered at times, but he didn't stop. He admitted fears he had never shared, feeling invisible in his own home, thinking his father might be disappointed in him, and the fear that he could never be enough. Daniel's heart ached, but he stayed calm, showing only understanding. "You don't have to be perfect," he said quietly. "You don't have to carry everything alone. I'm proud of you, not for what you do, but for who you are." Those words seemed to lift a weight off Ethan's shoulders. He slowed his pace, taking in the sincerity of his father's voice. And for the first time, he felt safe admitting his vulnerabilities. Meanwhile, Emily watched from the window, feeling a mixture of relief and quiet triumph. She knew Daniel needed to rebuild this connection himself, but she also understood that her steady presence, her willingness to listen and to be patient, had paved the way for this moment. She could feel the walls between father and son crumbling slowly but surely. There was no sudden miracle, just a steady, honest conversation, a willingness to understand, and the shared effort of love and care. Hours passed before they returned home. Ethan's shoulders were straighter, his eyes clearer, his expressions softer. Daniel put an arm around him, a small but meaningful gesture. Emily stepped forward and smiled, her heart swelling. Ethan looked at her, a shy, grateful smile crossing his face. "Thanks," he said quietly, "for everything, for not giving up on me." Emily's eyes misted. "You don't have to thank me. You just have to let yourself feel, to let yourself be heard." Later that evening, the three of them sat together in the living room. It was not perfect, there were still unspoken fears, still moments of tension, but the atmosphere was different. There was warmth, connection, and a sense of shared understanding. Ethan laughed lightly at a small joke Daniel made, and Emily felt the relief wash over her. The boy who had once whispered, "I can't take it anymore," was beginning to breathe again, beginning to feel part of a family that cared for him deeply. Emily realized that true healing did not come from forcing change or rushing conversations. It came from patience, from quiet support, and from allowing someone to open up on their own terms. And now, as the sun set outside, painting the house with golden light, she knew that this family, though tested and fragile, was stronger than it had been. They had faced the hardest moments together and had survived. For Emily, Daniel, and Ethan, the future was still uncertain. Challenges would come, emotions would rise and fall, and there would be days when shadows returned. But the breakthrough had been made. They had learned to speak, to listen, and to care without judgment. And for the first time in a long time, hope felt permanent, steady, and real. The house no longer felt heavy with unspoken pain, felt like a place where healing, love, and trust could grow, slowly but surely, one day at a time.